Chosen one. Before you listen with your ears, I ask you to listen with your heart, because what you are about to hear is not meant to entertain you. It is meant to awaken you. Somewhere along the journey of faith, many of us began to treat God like a solution provider rather than a sovereign king. We learned how to pray for blessings, but we forgot how to surrender to purpose. We mastered the language of asking, but we avoided the discipline of obedience. And quietly, without realizing it, we started building a relationship with God based on what He could do for us, instead of who He is to us. This message is not easy. It will touch the places in you that are tired of waiting, tired of trusting, tired of hoping. It will speak to the part of your heart that has whispered, God, why not me? It will confront the prayers you've prayed in desperation and the expectations you've carried in silence. But it will also heal you, because truth always does. If you have ever felt disappointed with God, confused by His timing, or wounded by His silence, then this moment is for you. Not to condemn you, but to realign you. Not to break you, but to build you. So take a deep breath and prepare your spirit, because the truth you are about to receive may shake what you thought you knew about God, but it will also reveal the depth of His wisdom, the power of His purpose, and the beauty of a faith that is not built on convenience, but on surrender, trust, and transformation. And in that hidden place where no applause follows you and no one affirms your struggle, God often does His deepest work. This is where identity is stripped of titles, where calling is separated from ambition, where faith is purified from selfish expectation. Many people want God's power, but few want God's process. Power attracts attention. Process requires patience. Power can elevate you publicly. Process humbles you privately. And God values what happens in private far more than what is displayed in public, because public fruit is only sustainable when private roots are deep. Chosen one, the reason your journey feels heavier than others is because your assignment is weightier. You are not being punished, you are being entrusted. Heaven does not invest training into people it does not intend to use. The pressure you feel is evidence that God sees capacity in you that you may not yet recognize in yourself. And capacity is always developed under resistance. Muscles grow when they are pushed beyond comfort. Faith grows the same way. If everything in your life were easy, your faith would remain shallow, fragile, easily shaken by opposition. There are moments when God will intentionally frustrate your plans, not because He enjoys seeing you struggle, but because your plans may be too small for what He intends to do through you. We often ask God to bless our vision, but rarely ask Him to destroy it if it contradicts His will. That is dangerous prayer, but it is a necessary one. Because until your vision bows to God's purpose, it will always compete with it. God will not assist what He did not author. This is where the emotional conflict intensifies. Because surrender feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Letting go of control feels like weakness before it feels like strength. Trusting God without guarantees feels risky to the human heart. We are wired to seek certainty, clarity, timelines. God often offers none of these. Instead, He offers Himself and foe. Many people that feels insufficient at first, but over time you learn that God's presence is more valuable than perfect circumstances. You may wonder why God allows you to see opportunities you cannot yet access, why He gives you dreams that seem far beyond your current resources, why He places you among people who appear to be moving faster than you. That tension is intentional. God allows you to glimpse the future to keep you moving, but He withholds full access to keep you dependent. Vision without timing creates humility. It reminds you that destiny is not achieved by effort alone, but by alignment with God's seasons. Being chosen often means being misunderstood. When God is shaping you, He may remove people who are comfortable with the old version of you. Not everyone can walk with you into the next season. Some relationships are seasonal, not permanent. This hurts deeply because separation feels like rejection. But God sometimes isolates before He elevates, not to make you lonely, but to make you focus. Noise is dangerous when God is trying to speak direction. God is not impressed by your activity if your heart is drifting from Him. You can be busy in ministry and still miss God. You can quote scripture and still resist transformation. Obedience is not about motion, it is about submission. Many people run ahead of God and then ask Him to bless where they arrived. God does not follow us, we follow Him. That reversal alone would heal much frustration in the body of Christ. There are seasons when obedience feels unrewarded. You pray, you serve, you remain faithful, yet nothing seems to change. This is where faith matures from transaction to relationship. When you no longer obey God for what He gives, but because of who He is. This is dangerous faith. This is faith that heaven trusts. Because if God can trust you to obey without immediate reward, He can trust you with greater responsibility. Emotionally, this is exhausting. There are nights when your prayers feel empty, when worship feels forced, when scripture feels distant. This does not make you weak, it makes you human. Even faith has seasons. God does not abandon you because you feel tired. He understands dust. He remembers you are human. What matters is not how you feel, but where you return. Will you withdraw or will you remain? God's silence is often an invitation to maturity. When a child asks constant questions, a parent answers patiently. But when a child grows, the parent expects understanding without explanation. Silence is not neglect, it is trust. God is saying, I believe you know me well enough now to trust me without constant reassurance. That is not cruelty, that is growth. You must also understand that God is not obligated to rescue you from consequences you repeatedly choose. Grace is not permission to ignore principles. Love does not cancel responsibility. Many believers confuse mercy with exemption. God forgives sin, but He does not suspend truth. What, yo? You plant, you will eventually harvest. This is not punishment, it is order. And order protects creation from chaos. Being chosen means your decisions matter more than you realize. Your private compromises affect your public authority. Your hidden habits shape your future influence. God is more concerned with who you are becoming than what you are achieving. Achievement impresses people. Character sustains destiny. That is why God will delay success until integrity can carry it. Sometimes you are asking God for open doors, but God is asking you for closed habits. Sometimes you are asking for breakthrough, but God is asking for obedience in small things. Sometimes you're asking for visibility, but God is asking for consistency. Heaven moves when alignment happens, not when pressure increases. And there's a painful truth here. God will not compete with idols, even subtle ones. An idol is not always a statue. Sometimes it is a dream, a relationship, a platform, a desire that is taken God's place in your heart. God loves you too much to share lordship, so He will challenge anything that tries to sit where only He belongs. This feels like loss, but it is actually deliverance. Chosen one, your tears are not wasted. God counts what people overlook. He sees the prayers whispered in disappointment. He sees the obedience that feels unseen. Heaven records faithfulness long before earth recognizes fruit. And recognition is not the goal anyway. Transformation is. God is not building your life for applause. He is building it for impact. Impact requires depth. Depth requires time. Time requires patience. And patience is one of the hardest disciplines for the human soul. Yet impatience has destroyed more destinies than opposition ever did. Many people could handle enemies but not waiting, could handle persecution but not obscurity, could handle attack but not delay. When you are tempted to rush, remember this: arriving early can be just as dangerous as arriving late. Timmy. NG is protection. God's calendar is precise. He is never late, but He is also never rushed. And when you align with His timing, what felt impossible suddenly unfolds with ease, because grace always meets obedience at the right moment. Your role is not to understand everything, but to stay faithful in what you know. Love God, serve people, walk humbly, obey promptly, trust deeply. These are not glamorous instructions, but they are powerful ones. The kingdom is built on simple obedience done consistently. There will be moments when you feel forgotten, when you wonder if your prayers have hit the ceiling and fallen back down, when it feels like everyone else hears God clearly except you. Do not panic in those moments. Faith is not always loud. Sometimes faith is quiet endurance. Sometimes faith is simply not quitting. God is not shaping you to fit into this world. He is shaping you to transform it. That is why you feel different. That is why you never fully belong. That is why comfort feels temporary and restlessness keeps returning. You are not created to settle. You are created to represent. And as this understanding continues to grow within you, you may find yourself grieving the version of God you once believed in, the version who existed primarily to solve problems and remove discomfort. And while that grief is real and valid, it makes room for a deeper relationship with the true God, the one who is not controlled by your expectations but committed to your transformation, the one who does not always calm the storm but strengthens you to walk through it, the one who does not promise ease but guarantees presence. And as that realization settles, you may feel both exposed and secure at the same time, because you begin to understand that if God is truly sovereign, then your life is not random, your pain is not pointless, your waiting is not wasted. And even now, in the middle of uncertainty, something holy is being formed within you, something that cannot be rushed, something that requires endurance, something that is quietly aligning your heart, your mind, and your will with a purpose far greater than your personal comfort. And as you continue walking in obedience, even without full clarity, even without immediate reward, even without visible progress, you are participating in a divine process that is far more intentional than it feels. And though you may not yet see where it is leading, the very fact that you are still standing, still trusting, still believing is evidence that God is not finished, that the story is still unfolding, and that what He is doing in you now is preparing you for what is yet to come, even as the weight of that calling continues to shape you day by day, moment by moment, step by step, in ways you are only beginning to understand. And in that unfolding, there comes a moment when you realize that much of your frustration with God was actually frustration with your own expectations. Expectations can become silent. See, on tracks we never discussed with heaven, we expect God to move when we feel ready, to answer when we feel desperate, to act when we feel we have waited long enough. But God does not operate on emotional urgency. He operates on eternal wisdom. What feels overdue to you may still be early in the eyes of eternity. And this realization humbles the heart because it forces you to admit that your perspective is limited, while His is complete. Chosen one, there is a reason God does not rush the formation of your character. Character is the container of calling. Without the right container, even a good gift can spill and be wasted. Many people pray for influence but lack restraint. They pray for authority but resist accountability. They want visibility but avoid vulnerability. God sees these inconsistencies long before people do. And because He loves you, He will correct privately before exposing publicly. That correction often feels like delay, but it is actually mercy. There are seasons wherein God will intentionally allow you to feel weak, not to shame you, but to detach you from self-reliance. Strength that comes from confidence in self will collapse under pressure. Strength that comes from dependence on God endures. When God strips away your sense of control, He is not abandoning you, He is repositioning you to trust Him fully. And trust is the currency of the kingdom. Emotionally, this stripping can feel terrifying. You may feel like you are losing parts of yourself, like the version of you that knew how to survive no longer works. That is because God is not interested in survival mode. He is interested in transformation. Survival keeps you alert. Transformation makes you effective. Survival keeps you guarded. Transformation makes you grounded. God does not want you constantly bracing for impact. He wants you rooted in truth. You may notice that the deeper God works in you, the more sensitive you become to compromise. Things you once tolerated now grieve you. Converse. Patience you once enjoyed now feel empty. Ambitions that once excited you now feel shallow. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. When God sharpens your discernment, it can feel isolating, but discernment is not meant to separate you from people. It is meant to protect your assignment. God is not calling you to escape the world, but to influence it without being shaped by it. That tension is difficult to live in. You are present, but not absorbed. Engaged, but not entangled. Compassionate, but not compromised. This balance requires constant surrender. And surrender is not a one-time decision. It is a daily posture. There is also a moment when you realize that many of your prayers were attempts to negotiate with God rather than align with Him. God, if you do this, I will do that. But God does not bargain. He invites trust. He invites obedience without leverage. Because obedience with conditions is not obedience at all. It is manipulation disguised as faith. True faith says, even if you don't, I will still follow. This is where the emotional weight of being chosen becomes undeniable. because it means your obedience is not contingent on outcome. It means you must keep walking even when the path feels lonely. It means you must remain faithful even when no one is watching. It means you must forgive even when you are genuinely wronged. It means you must love even when it costs you pride. God is not unaware of how difficult this is. He does not demand perfection. He desires submission. He is not looking for flawless people, but yielded ones. Yielded hearts are moldable. Resistant hearts are brittle. God can work with weakness far more easily than he can work with pride. There are times when God will allow you to fail. This is difficult to accept because we often equate failure with disqualification. But failure, when surrendered, becomes instruction. God uses failure to expose motives, refine humility, and realign direction. A fall does not define you unless you refuse to rise. What disqualifies is not failure, but refusal to learn. Being chosen does not mean you'll always get it right. It means God is committed to shaping you until you reflect his intent. That shaping can be uncomfortable, repetitive, even exhausting. You may feel like you keep encountering the same lessons in different forms. That is because God does not move you forward until the lesson is internalized. Promotion without preparation leads to collapse. There is a deep emotional relief that comes when you stop trying to impress God, when you realize he is not grading your performance, but shaping your posture, when you understand that his love is not earned by effort, but expressed through obedience. This frees you from striving and invites you into partnership. God is not asking you to carry the weight of your destiny alone. He carries what you cannot, but he will not carry what he has already given you authority over. There is a balance between dependence and responsibility. Prayer does not replace discipline. Faith does not cancel effort. Trust does not excuse disobedience. God empowers what you steward. You may feel like you are in between seasons, no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. This in-between space is uncomfortable. It feels unstable, undefined, but it is also fertile. Transformation happens in transition. Do not rush to label this season as failure or stagnation. God often does his most precise work in the waiting room. Chosen one, you must also confront this truth. Not everyone will understand your obedience. Some will call it foolishness. Some will say you are wasting time. Some will pressure you to take shortcuts. But shortcuts create shallow foundations, and shallow foundations cannot support lasting influence. What you build slowly will stand when storms come. God is not impressed by speed. He is impressed by faithfulness. The kingdom does not operate on urgency. It operates on order. And order often looks slow to those who value efficiency over eternity. There will be moments when you are tempted to compare your journey to others. Comparison is a thief of clarity. It blinds you to your unique assignment. God does not duplicate callings, he customizes them. What he does in someone else's life is not a measure of what he intends to do in yours. Stay in your lane, trust your process. Emotionally, comparison creates unnecessary pain. It makes you question God's fairness instead of trusting his wisdom. Remember, you do not know the full cost of someone else's blessing. You only see the highlight, not the sacrifice. God may be sparing you from pressures you are not yet equipped to carry. God is far more interested in your obedience than your opinion. You may not agree with his methods, but you must trust his heart. Agreement is not required for obedience. Trust is. And trust is built over time through consistent surrender. There are seasons when God will ask you to plant when you want to harvest, to give when you want to receive, to serve when you want to be seen. These seasons test motive. They reveal whether you are pursuing God or using him. They expose whether your faith is rooted in truth or convenience. Being chosen means your life is prophetic even when you are unaware of it. People are watching how you endure, how you respond, how you wait. Your consistency is speaking louder than your words. You are modeling faith whether you realize it or not. And in moments of deep exhaustion, when you feel like you have nothing left to give, remember that God does not draw from your strength, he supplies it. He does not demand what he does not empower. When you reach the end of yourself, you are not failing, you are arriving at dependence. God's grace is not a substitute for growth, but it is the environment in which growth happens. Grace gives you room to mature without condemnation. It allows you to stumble without being destroyed. But grace does not excuse stagnation. It empowers movement. You may fin. That the more you surrender, the less control you feel, yet the more peace you gain. Peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of alignment. When your will agrees with God's will, even difficulty becomes bearable. God is not shaping you for applause, popularity, or validation. He is shaping you for faithfulness. Faithfulness is quiet. It is consistent. It is often unnoticed, but heaven honors it deeply. As this understanding continues to settle into your spirit, you may find that your prayers change again, becoming less about asking God to do things for you and more about asking Him to do things in you. Less about escape and more about endurance. Less about outcomes and more about obedience. And in this shift, something profound happens because your faith becomes less fragile, less reactive, less dependent on circumstances, and more anchored in truth. And though the journey may still be long and the process may still feel heavy, you begin to walk with a different posture, no longer dragging your feet in disappointment, but standing upright in trust, knowing that even when you do not understand the path, you are not walking it alone. And even when the road stretches farther than you expected, every step is still under divine supervision, shaping you, strengthening you, aligning you. As the work continues quietly, steadily, intentionally, unfolding layer by layer, lesson by lesson, season by season, without rush, without shortcuts, without compromise, as God continues to do what He has always done best, forming purpose within you while you remain in motion, learning, yielding, enduring, and becoming, even now, in ways you are still discovering, still growing into, still walking toward, as the journey presses on without pause, without finality, without conclusion. And as you keep moving forward in this unfolding journey, you may begin to notice that God is less concerned with explaining Himself and more concerned with shaping your response. Life W. It'll not suddenly become clearer, but your spirit will become steadier. You may still face uncertainty, but you will face it differently. Not with panic, not with desperation, but with a quiet resolve that says, even here, God is still God. This is the mark of spiritual maturity, not the absence of questions, but the presence of trust. Chosen one, there is a dangerous assumption many believers carry without realizing it, that clarity must come before obedience. But in the kingdom, obedience often comes before clarity. God reveals just enough light for the next step, not the entire journey. If He showed you everything at once, you might run ahead of Him or collapse under the weight of what you see. So He gives direction in pieces, strength in portions, grace for today, not for tomorrow. That keeps you dependent, and dependence keeps you aligned. Emotionally, this dependence can feel like vulnerability. We prefer control because control gives us the illusion of safety. But safety is N. T found in control, it is found in surrender. Control isolates you. Surrender connects you to God's strength. And the longer you walk with Him, the more you realize that what you once called uncertainty was actually invitation. An invitation to trust deeper, lean harder, listen closer. There will be times when you obey God and it costs you something precious. Not because obedience is cruel, but because sacrifice is part of worship. True worship is not only what you sing, it is what you surrender. God does not demand sacrifice because He needs it. He invites sacrifice because you do. Sacrifice detaches you from what could enslave you. It keeps your heart free. You may find that God asks you to release things that are not sinful, but simply distracting. Not everything God removes is bad. Some things are just not beneficial for where He is taking you. This is painful because you may genuinely love what He asks you to lay down. But love does not give you ownership. Everything you have stewardship, not possession. And God has the right to reassign what He has entrusted. Chosen one, there is a quiet test that comes with waiting, the test of contentment. Can you be grateful in the present while believing for the future? Can you honor God where you are without resenting where you are not? Discontentment does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like restlessness, dissatisfaction, constant comparison. These are subtle indicators that your heart may be leaning toward outcome instead of obedience. God does not withhold blessings to tease you. He withholds to protect you from misuse. A gift received too early can become a burden instead of a blessing. Timing determines impact. And God's timing is never arbitrary. It is calibrated to your growth. You may notice that the more God shapes you, the less you crave validation. Approval from people begins to lose its grip. Praise becomes pleasant, but no longer necessary. Criticism becomes painful, but no longer paralyzing. This emotional shift is evidence of maturity. When your identity is anchored in God, external voices lose their power to define you. There is also a moment when you realize that God's work in you is not linear. Growth comes in cycles. Progress is followed by pruning. Breakthrough is followed by responsibility. God does not allow you to remain on spiritual highs indefinitely. He brings you back to ground level, where character is tested, habits are formed, and faith is practiced in ordinary moments. Ordinary faith is what sustains extraordinary calling. Being chosen does not exempt you from doubt. Doubt is part of the human experience. What matters is where you take your doubt. Doubt does not disqualify you, hiding from God does. Bring your questions to Him. Bring your fears to Him. He is not intimidated by your honesty. He is offended only by pretense. There are times when you will feel like you are giving more than you are receiving, serving more than you are being poured loving more than you are being loved. This imbalance can drain you emotionally if you are not careful. That is why God teaches the chosen one how to draw from Him, not from people. People are channels, not sources. When you expect people to be your source, disappointment is inevitable. When God is your source, people become a blessing, not a necessity. God is teaching you endurance, not urgency. Endurance is the ability to remain steady over time. Urgency burns fast and fades quickly. Endurance builds slowly and lasts long. Many people start well but do not finish strong. God is more concerned with how you finish than how you begin. Chosen one, understand this. Your obedience today is creating options for your future. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, discipline over distraction, faith over fear, you are expanding what God can trust you with. Heaven responds to faithfulness, not to noise, not to hype, not to ambition, but to consistent alignment. Emotionally, there will be days when you feel unseen, when your efforts feel unnoticed, when you wonder if what you are doing even matters. In those moments, remember that God's measure of success is different from the world's. He does not measure by numbers alone, but by faithfulness, obedience, and impact on eternity. What seems small to you may be monumental in heaven. God is not training you to impress people. He is training you to steward influence. Influence requires restraint. Influence requires humility. Influence requires listening more than speaking. God often teaches these lessons in seasons of silence. Silence is uncomfortable, but it sharpens discernment. When noise is removed, you learn to hear God's voice more clearly. You may notice that God is teaching you how to wait without complaining, how to trust without demanding, how to obey without negotiating. These are not glamorous lessons, but they are foundational ones. Many people want platforms but have never learned patience. Many want authority but resist submission. God will not skip steps to satisfy impatience. There is also the emotional reality of spiritual loneliness. Being chosen can feel isolating because not everyone understands your convictions. Not everyone shares your hunger for God. Not everyone is willing to walk the narrow path. This does not mean you are superior. It means you are called differently. Loneliness is not always absence of people. Sometimes it is absence of alignment. God often uses loneliness to deepen your dependence on Him. Chosen one, you are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not failing. You are being formed. Formation takes time, and time is not your enemy. It is your ally. What God builds slowly cannot be destroyed easily. You may find that God asks you to forgive people who never apologized. This feels unjust. It feels unfair. But forgiveness is not about excusing behavior. It is about freeing your heart. Unforgiveness ties you to the past. Forgiveness releases you to move forward. God does not ask you to forgive because others deserve it. He asks you to forgive because you deserve peace. There will be moments when obedience feels costly and disobedience looks tempting. Shortcuts will appear attractive. Compromise will offer immediate relief. But relief is not the same as peace. Relief fades, peace remains. Peace is the reward of alignment. Do not trade peace for speed. God is teaching you to value faithfulness over feelings. Feelings fluctuate. Faithfulness anchors. When you learn to obey regardless of how you feel, You become spiritually stable. Stability is rare. That is why God values it so highly. As you continue walking, you may notice that God's instructions become quieter, not louder. Not because He is distant, but because you are learning to listen. Maturity requires less noise. A whisper is enough when your heart is attentive. Chosen one, there is a sacredness in endurance. Endurance is not passive, it is active trust over time. It choosing to remain aligned when nothing around you is changing. It is choosing to believe when evidence is scarce. This kind of faith moves heaven, even when earth remains silent. God is not asking you to carry tomorrow's burden today. Grace is given daily. When you try to carry the future, anxiety follows. When you focus on today, grace meets you. Stay present, stay obedient, stay humble. You may not feel strong, but strength is not the absence of weakness. It is the decision to keep going despite it. God's power is most evident when your limitations are exposed. That is not failure, that is partnership. And as the days continue, as the process deepens, as the lessons repeat in quieter ways, you may find that your heart becomes less frantic and more settled, less demanding and more receptive, less focused on what God should do and more aware of what He is already doing within you. And this awareness does not come with fireworks or dramatic shifts, but with a steady inner alignment. NT, a growing trust that does not need constant reassurance, a faith that does not panic at delay. And as this trust continues to form, you remain in motion, not rushing, not retreating, simply walking forward with intention, allowing God to continue shaping, refining, and aligning you through moments both seen and unseen, through obedience that feels ordinary and faith that feels stretched, knowing that even now, without full clarity, without final answers, the process is still active, the purpose still unfolding, the calling still alive, and the journey still moving forward, uninterrupted, unresolved, continuing on. And as the journey keeps unfolding, you begin to recognize that God is far more interested in who you are becoming than in what you are accomplishing. Accomplishments can impress people, but transformation honors heaven. You may build things, start things, influence others, but if your inner life is neglected, everything external will eventually collapse. God guards your inner life fiercely, even when you don't understand why certain doors remain closed. He is protecting what must last. Chosen one, there is a sacred slowness in God's ways that frustrates the hurried heart. We live in a world addicted to speed, instant results, quick validation. But God moves at the speed of formation. He works layer by layer, belief by belief, motive by motive. He dismantles what is false so He can establish what is true. This dismantling feels like loss, but it is actually alignment. You are not being reduced, you are being refined. There are moments when obedience feels invisible, when no one notices your restraint, your discipline, your quiet no to things that could have advanced you faster. But heaven notices. Heaven records every unseen decision. God does not forget faithfulness simply because people overlook it. The reward of faithfulness is not always immediate, but it is always intentional. Emotionally, you may wrestle with discouragement. Discouragement. T is subtle. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, "What's the point?" It makes you question whether your effort matters, whether your sacrifice is worth it. In those moments, you must remember that discouragement is not evidence of failure. It is often evidence of resistance. The enemy does not waste energy opposing what has no future. Resistance usually follows potential. God is teaching you how to stand when encouragement is absent. This is maturity, when your motivation is no longer fueled by praise but anchored in conviction. Conviction outlasts emotion. Emotion fades, conviction remains. Conviction keeps you walking when feeling tells you to stop. Chosen one, you may also notice that God begins to deal more deeply with your thoughts, not just your actions, but your inner dialogue, because thoughts shape beliefs, and beliefs shape behavior. God does not want surface obedience with a resistant mind. He wants internal agreement. This is why transformation begins in the renewing of your mind. You cannot live aligned if you are constantly thinking contrary to truth. There are seasons when God will intentionally reduce your options. He narrows the path so you cannot rely on alternatives. This feels restrictive, but it is actually clarifying. When options are removed, focus increases, and focus is powerful. God often limits your choices so you can clearly see His direction. You may struggle emotionally with this narrowing. It feels like confinement. But confinement produces concentration, and concentration produces depth. Shallow lives require many distractions. Deep lives require focus. God is also teaching you discernment, the ABI, to recognize what looks good but is not God. Not everything that is beneficial is assigned. Not every opportunity is divine. Discernment protects you from wasting time on good things that are not your things. Time is precious. God guards your time because it is tied to purpose. Being chosen means your margin matters. You cannot live like everyone else and carry what God is entrusting to you. There are weights that may not be sinful but are still harmful. God calls you to lay them aside, not because they are evil, but because they slow you down. Purpose requires agility. Agility requires discipline. Emotionally, discipline can feel restrictive, but discipline is not punishment, it is training. Training prepares you for endurance. Without training, even gifted people collapse under pressure. God trains those He intends to use. There will be moments when you feel like God is repeating lessons, the same themes, the same challenges, the same areas of surrender. This repetition is no. T failure, it is reinforcement. God reinforces what He intends to establish permanently. He does not move on until the lesson becomes lifestyle. Chosen one, you must understand that God is not shaping you for one moment, but for longevity. Many people peak early and fade quickly. God is shaping you to last. Longevity requires restraint, wisdom, patience, humility. These qualities are formed over time, not overnight. You may feel like you are always being asked to wait, to trust, to endure, and you wonder when it will finally be your turn. But your turn is not a moment, it is a season. And seasons do not arrive by demand. They arrive by readiness. Readiness is not about skill alone, it is about maturity. God is teaching you how to carry disappointment without becoming bitter. Bitterness poisons purpose. It distorts perspective. It narrows compassion. God will not allow bitterness to coexist with calling. So He addresses it early, even when it hurts. There may be people who disappoint you deeply. Leaders, friends, family. This pain is real. God does not minimize it, but He also uses it. Disappointment reveals where your trust was misplaced. God does not want to be one of many supports. He wants to be your foundation. Foundations are tested by pressure. When people fail you, it hurts, but it also redirects your dependence. Chosen one, you are learning to distinguish between God's promises and your expectations. Promises are eternal. Expectations are often emotional. When expectations are unmet, disappointment follows. When promises are trusted, hope remains. God never fails His promises, but He does not fulfill them according to your timetable. Emotionally, hope can feel fragile when waiting is long, but hope anchored in God does not depend on circumstances. It is sustained by truth. Truth does not change with seasons. That is why God anchors you in truth, not feelings. You may notice that God is teaching you restraint in speech, saying less, listening more. Choosing silence over reaction. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Words have power. Uncontrolled words can damage credibility, relationships, influence. God teaches the chosen one when to speak and when to remain silent. There will be moments when you are misunderstood, when people interpret your obedience as pride, your boundaries as rejection, your silence as indifference. This hurts deeply, but God does not require universal understanding. He requires faithfulness. Misunderstanding is often the price of obedience. God is not shaping you to fit in, He is shaping you to stand firm. Firmness requires conviction. Conviction is formed in seasons when you choose truth over approval. Chosen one, you are also learning how to carry unanswered prayers without losing faith. Some prayers are answered immediately, others unfold slowly. Some are answered differently than expected, and some are answered in ways you may never fully see. This does not diminish God's goodness. It expands your trust. God is not obligated to explain every decision. Explanation is not the foundation of trust. Relationship is. The more you know God's character, the less you demand explanations. You trust His heart even when you don't understand His hand. Emotionally, there will be moments when you feel like giving up would be easier. Easier does not mean better. Easier does not mean right. God did not call you to easy, He called you to faithful. Faithfulness requires endurance. Endurance is built over time. You are being trained to walk by faith, not by sight. Sight demands evidence. Faith trusts before evidence appears. Faith is not denial of reality, it is confidence in God's sovereignty over reality. God is teaching you how to stay grounded when things go well and anchored when things fall apart. Extremes reveal maturity. Success tests humility. Failure tests trust. God allows both to shape you. Chosen one, you are not meant to live anxious about the future. Anxiety steer. Let's present grace. Grace is given for now. When you stay present, grace sustains you. When you rush ahead, anxiety overwhelms you. God is also teaching you to recognize His presence in ordinary moments, not just in breakthroughs, but in routine, not just in miracles, but in consistency. God is as present in your daily obedience as He is in your greatest victories. There is a quiet confidence forming within you, not arrogance, not self-assurance, but God assurance, a confidence that does not need to announce itself, a confidence that does not panic under pressure. This confidence is built through repeated trust. You may still have questions. You may still feel tension. But something inside you has shifted. You are less frantic, less reactive, more anchored. You are learning to walk with God, not just seek outcomes from Him. And as this process continues, without rush, without shortcuts, without final resolution, you remain on the path, still learning, still yielding, still trusting, still walking forward step by step, allowing God to continue His work in you, shaping your heart, refining your faith, strengthening your endurance, deepening your trust as the journey continues onward, unfolding without conclusion, without finality, without pause, moving steadily forward. Chosen one, let this truth settle deep in your spirit. As you stand where you are right now, God was never meant to serve your agenda. You were created to serve His purpose. And in that alignment is where real life begins. When you stop treating God like a personal assistant and start honoring Him as King, everything shifts. Your prayers gain depth. Your waiting gains meaning. Your pain gains purpose. You may not have all the answers, but you have His presence. You may not control the process, but you can trust the author. And as you continue to walk in obedience, even when it costs you comfort, even when it demands patience, even when it stretches your faith beyond what feels reasonable, know this with certainty. Nothing you surrender is wasted. Nothing you endure is ignored, and nothing God is shaping in you is accidental. You are not behind, you are not forgotten, and you are not being punished. You are being prepared, positioned, and aligned for a purpose far greater than convenience, far greater than applause, and far greater than what this moment can reveal. And if you remain faithful in this truth, you will one day realize that the very season that challenged you the most was the season that transformed you the deepest.